right
This
here?
is my game of the week for
Well, FA's
sure.
game of the week is
100%.
between, and this is a game that we talked about like months ago before the season even
Man, we were
started.
talking about it last year.
Yeah, I was talking about it last year, that it should have happened last year, right?
Yep.
Um, and that game is between the Whitney Young Dolphins and the Morgan Park Mustangs. That game will be played on Friday at Gately. I know we were messaging Val Warner about it. Whitney Young is off to a pretty good start, 3-0. They've been dominating teams. They got Max Warner in the backfield. We covered Max for his commitment day. How are we feeling about this game? Efa, this is one of the games that Max said that he was looking forward to
Yeah.
outside of the game that's going to be played on his birthday. Who we think will win this game between essentially last year, Whitney Young was undefeated and they was the number one seeded team in Class 7A. And Morgan Park went undefeated against the Chicago teams, and they were the number one seed in Class 5A last year for the state playoffs. And they didn't play each other last year. Whitney Young was able to play Kenwood twice and ended up beating Kenwood in the city championship, but also in the regular season as well. How we feeling about this matchup?
Man, so this is the most anticipated game for me since last year because I just couldn't understand how there's a conference championship crown, but the two best teams in the conference don't play each other. So obviously, two completely different teams from last year. It's not the two teams from last year. Guys have graduated, completely different teams, but they still get to face off. I do think this is probably the biggest game in Chicago Public League this season, even though it's some build up around some other games now that, Kenwood is kind of looking, like the top of the CPL. You still got Simeon, you still got Morgan Park, of course, Whitney Young. But it's just, for me, it's most anticipated because we get to see who was that better team in a sense. Not necessarily, but in a sense we do. But it's going to be interesting because Morgan Park is not the Morgan Park that was last year, that they were last year. Obviously, a lot of things
As
have
far as
changed
all the talent,
as far as the talent that's moved on, obviously. So they've played, and I think this is going to be the big difference is that sort of how we just spoke about East St. Louis and their opening schedule. Morgan Park really went out of their way to be extremely battle tested in those first two games in the season. And I think that was done on purpose just because they know that things are changing. They got some new guys out there and they need to be battle tested. They need to see who these guys are. Obviously, you have some returners, but for the most part, you got some new players who taking on starting roles. So you want to see what you're made of. You want to see who you are, and I think they've gotten a chance to see exactly who they are and the things that they need to work on. And then on another hand, for Whitney Young, I can't say the same thing.
they haven't been bad, and
They
just
have,
calling it straight out as it
yeah.
is, they haven't been nearly as battle tested as Morgan Park.
No. So do you have their schedule
I
up right
have
now?
I have their
Okay.
schedule
Can you
up right
can
here.
you who do they? I
So
believe they play Carver and who
they played
else?
Carver the first week. They won 41-0, and then they played I'm sorry, it's abbreviated Perspectives Leadership.
Perspectives.
The second week they won that game 41-14, and then they just played Westinghouse this past week, won that game 42-0. So they've been putting up a lot of points, but at the same time, they're not really playing nobody. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, so it's
No, they're
like
not.
they're not really playing nobody. But that's not a knock to them. Like everything that I say, right, is that who they're lined up against, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. Like
Exactly.
they're playing these teams that aren't as good as the teams
Competitive. Yeah.
that Mount Carmel, I mean not Mount Carmel, Morgan Park has played, but they're not in close ones against them. They're blowing them
No.
out. They're doing
Yeah.
exactly what they're supposed to be doing. You know what I mean? So it would definitely be a good test for them. This is going to be their first test for them for sure next week against Morgan Park. But like you said, on the flip side, Morgan Park went out of their way to purposely play these top teams. They played the reigning 5A state champions in Nazareth this last week. 2 weeks ago, sorry. But and then they also played, you know, a
Downers
team
Grove
that went
North.
to the a team that went to the semifinals in 7A last year in Downers Grove North. Did they go to this?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. They
yeah.
yeah they lost to
They played
Batavia.
Batavia. Yeah.
Yep.
So and they had a good. Even though they lost that game against Downers Grove North, that was a game. If that touchdown does not get called back, that's a game they probably would have won. So they could have been sitting here, you know what I'm saying, 2-1 instead of 1-2. They did handle business last week, winning their game against, was it the
Bulls
Bulls?
College Prep.
Yeah, Bulls College Prep. So it's gonna be a good one for them to see. And like you said, they haven't played anybody outside of Bulls College Prep in Chicago yet. They haven't really, played anybody. So we're gonna see how they match up for real when they play Whitney Young, and we're gonna see how Whitney Young,
I just
are they for real, or is it just gonna be, you
yeah,
know,
and I think
Morgan
I
Park's game
think
to
in